very passionate that the world today needs believers who aren't playing it safe. What's going on in the world today is hectic. There's so many things going on in the world. And even more so, the world needs the light of Christ, and they need Christians who are unashamed and bold to not only preach the gospel, but to go to the places that he's calling you to go. And my encouragement is, if he calls you, he'll equip you, he'll send you, he'll provide for you. Everything that you'll ever need, he'll give it to you. Because I always say, what he orders, he pays for.
I'm your host, Tim Tucker. I have a very special guest with me, and today it's a real joy to welcome Bec Scales, all the way from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome, Bec, to the Follow Forward podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be part of it.
So I always like to build the rapport at the beginning of the podcast, because we don't just randomly pick people to be on this podcast. We want people who have a connection with us. This is we say it's a global voices, but it's an Africa facing podcast. So you're not some random Australian that we got to come on this. Truth is that our lives, actually, I was thinking about this, our lives have intersected in various ways. And I think this is going to come out in our conversation. The first point of intersection would obviously be that you're actually a Cape Townian at heart. Is that right?
Yes, deeply. I may have been born in Brisbane, but I've spent 15 years in South Africa. And so I feel like I carry two nations in my heart. So yeah, maybe not on paper, not dual citizenship on paper, but dual citizenship in my heart. So that's how I would say it.
And I want to unpack more of those years with you, but our personal connection comes, I think, through three primary ways. This amazing church, shout out to Life Church in Sea Point. Which were you at Life Church all those years that you were
the
in?
The whole 15 years. Yeah. I was youth pastor, children's pastor, but the whole 15 years, that was my home, my spiritual home for the whole time. So yeah.
Secondly, my wife, Christina, who was
Chrissy.
Shout out Chrissy. Actually, I think she's on a break now. She's been doing some of the producing and various other things. But shout out to Chrissy. She was at Life Church when she first moved to Cape Town. So there was connection number two. And obviously out of Life Church came Life Child, which you were the director of.
Yeah, South African director for Life Child. So yeah, taking care of orphan and vulnerable children, Mozambique, Malawi, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. So
unpack that a bit more. Firstly, how did that come about that you got stuck in and involved with Life Child? How is that? I don't understand how that shaped your approach to life and ministry. I'm really keen for.
Sure. Well, I was teaching in Australia, so felt called to that for quite a few years. Studied to be a teacher in Australia, but while I was teaching in Australia, I had the opportunity several times to go to Uganda. We had heard about the ministry of Watoto Childcare Ministries in Uganda, and so my mum and I had been to a conference. We heard the mission, we felt very impacted. So as a family, we were quite keen to be involved. And then 3 months later, my mum actually passed away, and so my dad decided that as a family, instead of sending the money to build a house for orphan children in Uganda, he said, no, we're physically going to go build it in Uganda. And so this is 2005. And so as a family, then a few years later, we went and built a house in memory of our mum in Uganda. And 2 years after that, I took a team from my high school to build 2 more homes in Uganda. Had quite a number of trips, obviously, to Uganda, and really felt that God was just enlarging my heart for Africa, which started as a younger girl, which I can talk about later. But during those years, those several trips, almost every year or two, God would just kept I guess impacting my love for the continent. I wouldn't even say it's one particular country, but just the continent of Africa, what God wanted to do in the continent. And so that was sort of quite a few years. And then while I was teaching, I really felt this burden that I wanted to serve God, and I had a sense that it would be somewhere in the world. But in order to do that, I felt like I needed to be equipped spiritually and biblically. And so I took a year off from teaching, went to Colorado and went to a Bible school for a year, took leave. They sort of kept my job for me. But due to the different school years with America and Australia, I had about 3 months off at the end of my Bible college year. And so I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to backpack East Africa. And so I did that. Didn't know where I was going to sleep every night, which was somewhat terrifying. However, it was amazing. And I landed, went to a conference, and there I met Anthony Liebenberg. And so Anthony was at that conference. My dad was also there. So we had this conversation, and Anthony casually said, "You should come visit us in Cape Town." I'm like, that's great. I just didn't know who this guy was. And so I kept I kept my backpacking trip, and the whole goal of those 3 months, I had said to the Lord, God, I'm giving you these 3 months, and I'll go where you want me to go. I'll live where you want me to live. I will go anywhere in the world. But my condition from the Lord was, I need to know that you've sent me, and then I need to know that you've gone with me. Just like the Moses deal. I felt like this is the Moses deal. I'll go, but you better go with me. And so that was sort of this 3 month mission. So when I met Anthony, I wasn't really sure if that was the answer. So I kept traveling. And then right toward the end, I just said, Lord, like if I'm meant to go to Cape Town, you gotta really make it clear, and gave me the okay. So with the last money I had, I flew down to Cape Town and met Anthony, wondering why I'm there. And then right at the end of that week, he said, no, I'd like you to stay as my youth pastor, that God had spoken to him in Uganda. And that's why he invited me to come. And so I said, I was a bit surprised by that one as well. I was like, I thought maybe the Lord would lead me to Uganda or Tanzania. Cape Town felt almost off the radar, actually. And so I said, well, if the Lord says yes, I'll be here tomorrow. That's not the issue. I probably just thought that he might have said no. But God said yes. And so I had 8 weeks. I said, Anthony, I'll be back in 8 weeks. Let me pack up my life. Let me resign my job, and then I'll be there. And so moved 2009, January 2009, to be the youth pastor of Life Church in Cape Town. So that's the beginning. That's the beginning.
That's the beginning. But what actually, I
Yeah.
mean, let me just come in here because what I love about this is, I mean, the whole thing of this podcast, the follow forward thing is that, you know, only in as much as we are following the voice of God and following the example of Christ, or following
Hmm.
people following the example of Christ, will we progress forward into God's purpose for our life. You know, that's and
Totally.
and and yours has all those components. You're not
Mm,
only following God in terms of direction, directly for his direction, but you're also following the voice of God through someone who is following Christ
sure.
in as well. And those two things need
Absolutely.
converge so often, don't they? Because
Absolutely.
then if we're doing that, then we become the kind of leaders worth following. So the
Totally.
focus should be less on our leadership and more on our followership. And if we can get
Yes.
that part right, then maybe we'll actually be people worth following. So I
Totally.
love
Like
how
Paul said, like, follow me as I follow the example of Christ. It's like he's calling, he's like, follow me because I'm following Christ. Like, okay, so you got to trust the people following that you're following, that they're following Christ. So,
exactly, exactly. So that and that's the qualification. That is the
mm,
qualification for leadership. That's the qualification for influence. So clearly,
absolutely.
you land in Cape Town. Okay, I mean, look, give me the executive summary of before how you became a Christian. Just give me the real snapshot before then we'll come back to can it be done?
All right. So yeah, jump back about 15 years. I was 6 years old. I grew up in a family with an amazing mum and dad. Mum and dad love Jesus. Mum and dad married for 30 years. I've got three brothers. I've got twin brothers as well as an older brother. Uh, we all just love each other. We all love Jesus. And so I just grew up really, really blessed, to be honest. I had great parents and great siblings. And so at the age of 6, I just remember saying to my mum, I want to know God like you do. That was it. And so sat with my parents in the living room, still remember the seat, the corner, and then they just led me in a prayer of salvation, giving my heart to Jesus. Now, as a 6-year old, you know as much as you know at 6 years old, don't you? Right? Of what it means to give your heart to Jesus. But what happened at 6 grows into not just giving your heart, is actually giving your whole life. So that's the snapshot.
Yeah. Oh, and brilliant. And that explains then, you know, the family going on mission, being on mission together,
Mm,
family being exposed to things that most people would find outside of their comfort zone. You were
yes,
that was actually just part of your family DNA and family life, and was part of following Jesus for your family
yes.
and for you. Yeah,
Well,
amazing.
one of those key defining moments, I would just throw that in there, is that it was actually when I was 15, because my dad traveled a lot for work, he would sometimes take us with him. And so when I was 15, we went to the UK, and then we went to China and Hong Kong as part of the trip. And I just remember that was a really defining moment spiritually, where I just believed that I hadn't not yet seen spiritual oppression before in that kind of way. And I remember, traveling UK was great. It was a great holiday, but then going to China and Hong Kong, it just had a different impact on us as a family. And it was amazing to see. But then it was actually in a Hong Kong English speaking church service that we went to on Sunday morning that God really convicted me about baptism. And I was there going, why is it this moment? Why is it this moment in a Hong Kong English speaking service that God's talking to me about baptism? It was so weird to me because the service had nothing to do with baptism. They didn't mention baptism. But I came home so moved, said to my parents, I need to get baptized. They're like, okay, that's great. And so I came home and got baptized. But I do believe that that was a really significant moment of God opening my eyes and my heart to the world. And to see the UK and then Asia, in the same kind of trip, seeing the differences and God's heart for all nations, I just think is probably one of the key seeds or turning points for the future in missions. Yeah.
Sure, sure, exactly. Yeah, and it's incredible how God prepares us, isn't it? And everybody's journey in that is unique. There's no recipe.
Yeah,
Again, that's things that it's just being open-hearted, open-minded, being ready to obey. It's and God will meet us in the ways that are right for us, and
totally.
direct for us, and then He'll confirm it in various ways as well. But I think that seems to me to be a barrier for so many young Christians, is that or young people is how do I know what God is saying? And
Mm,
it's, oh
yeah,
no, speak to you uniquely, and then you can test
absolutely.
it. And so it's great to see how that's been worked out in your life. So you land in Cape Town. You
Mm,
are a youth pastor at a church you've never attended, serving under a man you barely know and family you barely know, in a city you'd not visited before. This sounds like a recipe for disaster. How did it go?
yes, not well, not well. The beginning. All I will say is that I made this decision in faith. I'm leaving it all behind. I'm burning the boats. Another servant for another day. I'm burning the boats, burning plan B, resigned, left my Australian salary in dollars and got on a plane. I'm on the way. And in the plane, I was thinking, what am I doing? Like, what have I done? Like, I have left mother, father, brothers, the whole works. And yet I had the most unbelievable peace. Like, I just knew, I know what it is to hear God. And when you hear God and you obey, nothing else actually really matters. And so it was fine. But when I landed, it just was a little bit of probably a shock to the system because I think we think sometimes as Christians, when we go and we honor and we are obedient, the obedience will lead to good things. And although, yes, it did, it just was a little bit more difficult in the beginning. And that's the test. And I do believe that God is a good dad, right? He's a good father in that he even allows testing to refine our commitment and refine our faith. And so those few weeks slash months were quite challenging for a number of reasons. I think the youth and the youth leaders that I had arrived to, they weren't so sure. So the leadership might have been sure, but the youth and the young leaders at the time maybe weren't so sure about this very Australian, very pale, very female Australian who probably was a little naive in a lot of ways. And so there might have been some challenges there. There was, one of the youth leaders actually passed away in the first month that I was there, and that brought on a whole lot of other responsibilities, which were definitely challenging. But I remember I had to take the youth leaders, some of them were teenagers, to the funeral home, and so there was a lot going on in that first month. However, I believe it was sort of in those challenging moments that God challenged me about staying at my post. And particular scripture in Romans in the Message translation talks about like staying at your post. And I just remember during those first 3 to maybe probably 6 months was like, God, this is not the picture of what I signed up for. Like, and yet you've called me. So this is hard. This is tough. And so God is like, but I'm still with you. Has my word changed because it's difficult? No. Like his call is still the same. My obedience is still the same. So I had to trust him through some difficulty. And obviously it all worked out well. And, people got to probably know who I was and that I wasn't too scary. The first little bit was a little bit of a challenge, but at the same time, I was surrounded with great people and great leadership who
Yeah.
loved me through it and yeah, carried me
Yeah.
through. So that's why I was there for 15 years.
Yeah, and we'll get to the kind of evolution of your role, and also the
Mm,
kind of tying in with your heart, particularly for vulnerable children and other things. We'll get to that just now, but I really just want to underline this testing thing because it is so common. I mean, I've lived in South Africa since 1998 and moved when I was 22 years old or 23 years old, something like that, from 23 from the UK.
mm,
Not quite as spontaneously as you. However, the initial conversation, it was with my uncle. My uncle was a pastor of a church in Cape Town, Kenilworth, Presbyterian Church, and he was on sabbatical in England in 1997, and I was spending some time with him and my aunt. And he said to me, our church are looking for a youth pastor. And I said, "Oh, I might be interested in that job." And he said, "Oh, that might not be such a stupid idea." And that shaped the rest of my life, that
wow.
simple conversation, and but then I went to South Africa, had the interview, whatever, and then had 6 months. So a lot of people ask me, "You've lived in South Africa so many years, isn't it a dangerous country? The crime, blah, 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 the
Mm,
reputation that it has." I
yeah.
said, "Well, actually, I was a victim of crime more in the UK in the 6 months prior between my decision to go and my leaving the UK. My car was stolen and wrapped around a lamppost.
Hectic.
We had 3 break-ins. In fact, the very day I got back from South Africa, house had been broken into and pretty not I didn't own much, I was a youth pastor, but the things I owned that were valuable to me were gone, and then my church office was broken into, I think, 3 times. Everything we'd built up for the youth ministry was taken, and then to top it all off, I got knocked over by a car and broke a couple of ribs, the month before I was due to go.
Wow.
And so, yes, we get tested. The test can come even in the security of the UK.
Totally. Hmm.
And I think, is it the devil having a go? Is it God testing? We never know. Then in the sovereignty of him, he allows us, doesn't he? Because
Mm,
then he strengthens our
totally.
resolve in that,
Mm,
because that just brings durability. It shows up. We can't stand on our own 2 feet, in the way that we thought, makes us have to become more dependent.
totally.
Maybe it's worth doing that caveat in the nature of this podcast is to say that, yeah, following forward doesn't mean sometimes that might be following stumbling forward. It might be roly polies
Totally.
forward. So those are some of the challenges. But yeah, amazing to hear that in your story and to see how you were thrown in at the deep end. So talk to us about this then progression. Life in Cape Town. I often talk about the kind of schizophrenic existence in
Hmm.
Cape Town, where you beautiful sea point. You've also got abject poverty in the
Hmm.
townships, and this huge disconnect between the rich and the poor. All the legacy and everything that goes on, and sometimes you can parachute in, and it can mess with your head a little bit, but also
Mm.
it can also help shape. Living in that tension can help shape us into what God is calling us into. What was that journey like for you?
Well, I think that's probably what was most, I guess, defining for me is that I could see the difference. There's an element of Cape Town. The beauty of Cape Town is unparalleled. Like, I still miss Cape Town. There's something about being in Australia that I'm like, I still miss Cape Town. And there's a great beauty, and I guess I'm talking landscape and city, etc. However, there's also quite a heartbreaking reality on the way to the airport. And so you drive in from the airport and you drive through that comparison as well. And I think from when I arrived, I realized that kids are kids no matter where they are. And I think to start off working with the youth in Sea Point, I think that there was obviously a lot of challenges there. And when it came to broken families and some dysfunctions, and yet the the need for kids to be loved and to have a purpose and value and hope, I guess, was obviously very clear and obvious in the role that I was had as a youth pastor. But 6 months later, um, Anthony asked me to be the children's pastor as well, and that's one of those moments where I trust my leader, and so I said yes. And so I'm like youth pastor now. I'm children's pastor, so 0 to 18 on you. And
Okay.
I just said yes. And I said to Anthony, I say yes because I trust you. And that really was why I said yes, because I trusted him. And so then I guess the role broadens to, okay, well, now it's like, babies, kids, and then I guess my eyes were open to not just the difficulties with teenagers and the struggles they were going through, but then younger kids, like families, even families in the Seapoint area or in schools. And I was involved in the schools ministry, and so kids that are being bused into Seapoint are not from Seapoint, and so they're coming from the different areas, township areas, and so that's when my understanding began to grow as well. Is that wow, there's a broad range of the needs that kids and youth were facing um, in the Seapoint, but also the greater Cape Town area. So a few years later, I step into the role of life child director, and then I was actually more involved in the work in the townships. And I think for me, I guess again, my realization is kids are kids no matter where they are. They still deserve the same love, security, protection, their rights, to be again protected. And yeah, I think protection is probably the key one that I guess I struggled with, is just the vulnerability that kids were facing um, in the township communities. But I think what I also realized in there is the incredible people that are in the townships, and so that's again, you're carrying the two extremes of the difficulties in a community such as like the townships, but also these incredible people who love Jesus, who are, I don't know, sharing the gospel and living lives for God in the same community. I think that was hard in the beginning to see and to witness, but at the same time, I realized, but that's where God is sending us. Like,
Mm,
God, I felt like
mm,
God's sending us to sometimes the difficult places. Why? Because He wants us to be the light where the
yeah,
light is needed, And it wasn't that there was no light there. It's just that there were people who were shining their light but needed strengthening and equipping and, you know,
yeah,
encouragement. So,
yeah. And I'm a great believer in there's mutuality in those relationships. God is forming us as much as we're serving.
absolutely.
And that's the blessing of it, isn't it? Because we get to
Mm,
experience something that we would never experience. That it could be, I guess, stereotyped as the resilience and the other things, but actually there's almost a beauty in the compassion. There's things that are going on in the forgotten places, that are
mm,
reflecting actually the light of God that we otherwise would not
totally.
experience if we stayed in the leafy suburbs or our safe little bubbles. And so
Absolutely.
stepping into those places is stepping actually into where Jesus would be stepping in and where Jesus is. We don't take Jesus to the margins. Jesus is in the margins. We go and join him in what he's doing. And Life Child is just a beautiful. I mean, we're big fans of Life Child. The message as a partner of Life Child. We
Mm,
we we just dearly love the work of Life Child. We have a word within the message that although if our focus is urban youth and communities, a word we had given to us years ago was we should never forget the ministry of the poorest to the poor, and so that's why we partner and the most vulnerable, particularly children. So share a little bit more about Life Child and your role then within Life Child, and and how you navigated, your leadership position within the context of trying to serve some of the most vulnerable children in Cape Town and obviously with Life Child Beyond.
mm. Yeah. So, I guess being the youth and children's pastor for a few years, I guess was a great platform to understand culture. Obviously, I'd come as an Australian, so I was fully aware that there were some, things I probably didn't fully understand. And so that was a sort of a great starting point of just understanding some of culture and also ways of, the needs of kids and youth, obviously in the more Seaport area. But then when there was the opportunity to, I guess, move into Life Child, I was a parent at that point, and so the juggling of kids and youth was definitely a challenge with young children. And so I had chat with Pastor Anthony, and he asked me about stepping into the role of director for Life Child. And so Life Child is, I guess, the social arm of Life Church. It's one and the same. Life Church and Life Child are one, but it's basically the social expression of taking care of the most vulnerable. And it is the work of the local church. It's not a separate organisation, but it is just one of the mission arms
Mm,
or aspects of the local church. And so, yeah, our communities just outside of Cape Town, we have work that goes there. Then there's Pretoria, as well as the work that happens in Mozambique, Malawi. and Zimbabwe. And so we have national directors in each of those countries. And so Anthony asked if I would step up as the South African director and sort of oversee operations and the ministry within our operations in South Africa, which was, I guess, such a joy for me. I really had for a long time, sorry, a real passion for the most vulnerable. Uh, and again, that probably stems from my desire to be part of the work in Uganda. And I really believe that God used that to, I guess, cement a real desire in me to be an advocate, to be a voice. And if anything, that's what I felt my calling was, is to be a voice for the voiceless, to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, Proverbs 30. And the ones that have the least voice need the loudest voice to speak and advocate for them. And so I really felt a great passion to do that, even though I was aware I didn't fully understand. There were certain things that I didn't know the language. However, what I did know was God, and I did know what God said about His heart and His love and His role, I guess, for the most vulnerable. And so to step into that new position, I guess, there was challenges for sure. At the same time, I believe that that's where God had sort of prepared me all these years. Even being a teacher, to youth pastor, children's pastor, was actually to step into that particular role. So the work of Life Child exists to reach orphan and vulnerable children and to restore communities for generational change. And so it's to, I guess, the first point is to reach the children and to, I guess, reach their needs, meet their needs. From the children, you reach the family and you meet the needs of the family, and then from the family you can then transform a community. So that's sort of our model, is child, family, community. And if you do it in that order, the child gets protected, the child's needs are met, but then also you can impact the family, which ultimately then can impact a community. And so we particularly worked in Samora Michel in Kosovo, just outside of in Cape Town. And our work in the beginning was working with some preschools. So we had 15 preschools in the beginning, and we sort of came alongside preschool owners in the informal settlement as well as the formal settlements. And we either rebuilt the preschools and then we transitioned all of them onto Montessori, which was quite a great, I guess, a process of training and equipping teachers to then be able to teach the children. So we've renovated preschools, we've sort of helped transition them to Montessori, and we did that for quite a number of years. And then what we realized during that time was there are vulnerable children, and then there is the most vulnerable children. And the more we were working with preschools and children in the area, the more we would come in contact with children that were even more vulnerable. And so out of that need to reach the most vulnerable became the need to provide housing, so accommodation for children who needed to be removed. And so we opened a Life Child Centre, and that allowed us to provide emergency foster care and emergency placements for children that needed to be removed immediately. And so we had mums as well as children living in our Life Child Centre as well as a preschool. And so, yeah, it was a bit of a broad range of activity, but again, child, family,
Mm.
community.
So what were there during that period of time? What were some of the primary lessons you learned about leadership, your leadership style, and what God was doing in you, and the character of a leader that He was forming in you through those experiences?
I mean, the big one is, what do you do with adversity? What do you do when things don't go the way you want it to go? What do you do when maybe God doesn't answer the prayer the way you have wanted it to go? When things don't go,
That never happens, does it? You know?
never. It always goes the way we want it to go. But I think that's really, I guess. But again, I feel like I was in some ways prepared for that. My mum passed away quite surprisingly. We prayed for her. We believed she was going to be healed. We just expected her to be healed. I didn't even doubt that she was not going to be healed. It just was sort of a given. So in 2005, when she did pass away, again, for me, that was a wrestle of faith to say, well, does God change based on whether He answers prayer the way we want it to or not? And my youth pastor at the time, he just challenged me. He said, "Well, surely your view of God doesn't change based on whether He healed your mum or not." And so for me, I guess that was a bit of a life lesson for me to go, okay, well, actually, either God is good because He's good and He's always good, regardless of what He does or doesn't do, or He's not. And so I just made a decision when I was younger that I'm never going to shake my fist at God. And that's sort of a term that I have, is I'm never going to shake my fist at God because I don't understand. but rather I'm going to just keep, he is good. Now, he might not do the things that I want him to do it, but he's still good. So I've got to find what he is doing in the midst of difficulty, hardship, grief, trauma. And so I guess I definitely found that in the work, is that what happens when traumatic things happen, what happens when difficulty happens. Sometimes it was to us, but more so to the people that we were trying to help and that we were coming alongside of, is that they were facing a lot of grief, heartache, difficulty, trauma a lot of the time. And what do you say in the midst of that grief and trauma and lack and poverty? Well, actually, God is still good, you know? And I guess Matthew 6:33 is obviously a key life verse for me, but seek first the kingdom of God and all these other things will be added onto you. And
Yeah.
sometimes we're so busy trying to figure out the other things that we don't quite put him and his kingdom first. But I guess that's the promise, right? Is that if we seek first his kingdom, then we can trust him for all the other things. So, I mean, there's so many things, but that would be probably the key
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's fantastic, Beck, and I think really relevant for what we're trying to share through this podcast. But it does beg a question as we bring your story up to date. Why are you not still in Cape Town?
Why am I not in Cape Town? That's a tough question. so, so to answer that question,
What is God doing in your life now and into the future? That's what I
come
really
on.
meant.
That's a great question. Well, in order to answer that question, I probably need to go back about 14 years just to introduce the fact that while I was kids and youth pastor, the Lord sort of brought, I guess, a change into my life of becoming a parent. And so, uh, yeah, in 2011, I brought twin baby girls home. And so that was they're the joy of my life, Bushle and Okushe. So they are just turning
I
15.
was I was going to ask you about that, and I'm so glad you brought it up because when I was thinking about the parallel stories,
Yes.
the fact that I've adopted, been on that journey with my late wife Laura, and
Mm,
and the joy of that journey, just so amazing. And obviously, I see your posts and resonate, and God puts families together in beautiful
amen.
wonderful ways, and that's just something
Yes.
to celebrate. So I wanted to say we celebrate that together, don't we, with how God
Yes.
done that.
Totally.
But clearly, it's also life changing. Babies change our world for good. So please
They
continue the story.
yes, they do. So I just was, youth pastor, children's pastor, living my life, and I may not have seen it coming, and yet God did. And so, yeah, twin baby girls were brought into my life, and I'm so very grateful that God knew how to put the pieces together. But yeah, I brought twin girls home, and they are about to turn 15, and so it was quite a journey with the actual adoption. I was Australian, and so when you want to talk about trusting God through difficulties and certain government organisations and agencies who tend to not make it super easy to do the things that God's wanting you to do, there was a lot of challenges in that process to finalise paperwork, and so that took a very very long time. However, it's just been an unbelievable journey of what it means to say yes. And I do remember the conversation that I had with the Lord just very early on in the beginning of that when I first met them on that day. And again, it was will you say yes? And the power of saying yes to something that you've got no idea what you're saying yes to. I think that's where the greatest blessing and joy comes. And I've had that so many times. When Anthony first asked me to come, will I say yes? I was like, what am I saying yes to? But I said yes because it was coming from the Lord. And again, when God's asked me about what I said yes to become a parent, I'm like, okay, but God, I trust you and I'll be their mum if you're their father. And that was just basically my deal with the Lord. I will be their mum, but you need to be their father because a father protects and a father provides. And again, if you do your part, I'll do mine, I'll do the best I can. And it's just been such an amazing journey. I'm just so grateful. I'm so proud of my girls. It's Abigail Okusle and Esther Bushle. So they've got two beautiful names. So they get called different names by different people. But basically, along that journey of the adoption process and just all the paperwork, which obviously you would know well, 2 or 3 years ago, God just started making it quite clear that we needed to come back to Australia. And the reason for that is because, due to adoption laws and rules and all the things, the only way for my girls to get Australian citizenship is to live in Australia. And so we couldn't do it from afar. And we have faced one situation before whereby on different passports, traveling was difficult. And so I just didn't want to take that risk. And so we really had to do it, start the process before they turned 16. And so, yeah, it was again another God thing. I'm like, God, if you want us to do this, then you're going to have to make it all happen. And so 2 years ago, yeah, we started the process of getting permanent residence for them. And again, miracle after miracle after miracle. I can't describe how many miracles, but probably too many to count. But they were granted permanent residence in Australia. And so we moved here January 2024 in order to spend the 5 years that it would take effectively for them to become Australian citizens. So that's why we are here. We came at the beginning of their grade 8 effectively to do the 5 years of high school. So that's why we are here. That's the root cause of why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm glad how it weaved in the story of the girls. And I can relate. We've had the people on different passports issues, and yeah, we had with my daughter Erin. She was 15 before the British would admit that she was British, and so we we would yeah, you're right. It was a couple of times. It was nerve wracking, to
Mm,
be on British and the South separate passports and thinking if for any reason I need to travel immediately,
yes.
it can't happen because Aaron needs to apply for a visa, So for us,
Yeah.
it's a series of miracles that actually led to the British allowing that. Yeah, and there are seasons, aren't there? I mean, it's a cliche, but it's so true that there are these seasons in
Hmm.
life and things that God has stirred up in your heart over many years. Will still, I'm sure, be bearing fruit in your life even now and into the future
Exactly.
that He has for
Mm,
you and the girls. And so we need to wrap up this conversation. I do feel we could probably talk for another hour quite easily. This again, the theme of this podcast, follow forward, is looking at Christ and how we have followed Him in our lives. But I also want us to think about those who are following in our footsteps, the emerging leaders who are coming through. So from all your life experiences, and maybe we can define that in this phrase, stepping into the unknown. It seems to be that was a theme for
mm.
you. And so if emerging leaders are fearing or concerned that God is calling them to step into an unknown future, what is the piece of advice that you would give them? How can they find the courage and faith to do that?
Just do it. I, I really don't. I've got nothing else. I've got nothing else for you. Sorry, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I just want to say that I have a great passion. I'm very passionate that the world today needs believers who aren't playing it safe. There and again, I feel like I grew up in an era that's very different to the world today. What's going on in the world today is is hectic. There's so many things going on in the world, and even more so, the world needs the light of Christ, and they need Christians who are unashamed and bold to not only preach the gospel, but to go to the places that He's calling you to go. And my encouragement is, if He calls you, He'll equip you, He'll send you, He'll provide for you everything that you'll ever need. He'll give it to you, because I always say what He orders, He pays for. So if He orders it, He'll pay for it. Whereas if we think that we're going to try and save our life, protect our life in order to whatever, then we'll probably lose it. And again, Matthew 6:25, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. And whoever loses their life for my sake, for Jesus' sake, you'll save it, will find it. And I think that's my encouragement is, don't try and live a safe life, because I just feel like the adventure that God has for us is only ever discovered when we step into obedience with Him. It's going to probably be in a difficult kind of way, either in a way that stretches you, stretches your faith, stretches your confidence, stretches your control. That's a big issue, is our control, when we're out of control. But when you're out of control, it means you've got to trust Him, because He's the one that's in control. And I just have seen that time and time again. When I go hands off, I'm like, oh, this is too big for me. But God, I'm jumping all in. I'm just not the kind of person that I'll just put one toe in. I'm like, life's too short for that. I'm either going to go all in, I'm not going to go at all. And so I just feel like, number one, I would just say you've got to hear God, because we want to all probably all do bold things for God, but if we don't hear Him, we can never actually obey. And I often sometimes got frustrated with the Old Testament. I love the Old Testament, but it often says, the Lord said to Abram, the Lord said to Joseph, the Lord said to Joshua. It's because the Lord said to Joshua to go and do. So the same thing for us. Like, we need to be in a place where we can say, the Lord said to Bec. And if we have that same confidence and authority to hear, the Lord said to me, then we can then go in the confidence of that word. Whereas if we're not sure what God's saying, you'll never have the confidence to step out. So that would probably be my first thing. First, hear from him. And it's okay to ask for confirmation. I've done that many times. God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just confirm it. And guess what? He does. He does. But he knows that I'm going to then obey, and I'll step out if he confirms it. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So, Bec, no regrets?
No regrets. You know, sometimes my only concern is I'm so grateful that I didn't hide back out of fear, is that God at least gave me the courage to trust him, and that I did say yes and I did step out. Because my life, I don't want to think about that, what it would have been if I hadn't have said yes so many times to his open door. So
wow, so your faith is infectious, and your story is inspiring. We do appreciate you coming on and sharing it with us. And so Bec, thanks so much. This has been the Follow Forward podcast. Today it's been Real Stories with Bec Scales, the global voice, Christ-centered servant leadership. We're going to have more conversations like this on future episodes of Follow Forward podcast. So please join us there. For now, thanks so much, Bex, and goodbye. God bless.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Follow Forward podcast. This may have been my idea, but I worked with an awesome team to make it come to life. Thank you to Lucy for guest management, scheduling, and being a real gap filler. Jordan for taking over the guest management baton, as well as doing content production, scripting assistance, and editing of these podcasts. Alistair and my lovely wife, Christina, for technical production, and Taryn for taking behind-the-scenes content and crew support. Whether you're watching or listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you are on, and share this episode with your friends so we can inspire even more people together. We release a new episode every Thursday, along with extra content to help you grow as a leader of people and a follower of Christ. Follow my Facebook page at Dr. Tim Tucker to access all the bonus content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to send a DM or leave a comment letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode. God bless, and we'll see you next week.